Hello and welcome to Fueling Around with me, Jason Plato, and the man who puts the high into high performance. It's Dave Vitty.
Hi.
Now, Fueling Around is powered by Adrian Flux. As the UK's largest specialist insurance broker, Adrian Flux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help you save money on your car, your bike, or even your home insurance. Dave, how are we?
I'm all right, thank you. Actually, better than when we last spoke because I had just entered into my 10-day isolation because of COVID. I tested positive. And actually, as of today, I'm officially street legal for the first time, just in time for Christmas. So,
Is that right?
I have a certain spring in my step. I'm looking forward to getting back to some kind of normality, venturing beyond my front door and being able to put the bins out on my own again. And life is good.
Do I detect a freshly shaven face and all looking sparkly?
Might have had a little shave to celebrate my newfound freedom. So yes, all is good. And yourself?
All right, mate. Yeah, I'm good. I don't feel 100%, but I think that's just a bit of man flu coming on, I think.
I think you'll weather the storm and you'll get us through. And you know what? If anybody is going to teach us how to be positive and how to get through any kind of adversity in life, it's today's special guest.
It certainly is. And our guest today is a TV host. Well, he's as smooth as chocolate. Following in the footsteps of his idol, Des Lynam, he's presented Kids Telly, Sport on the BBC, and now he's the main man at BT Sports football coverage. It is, of course, the one and only Mr. Jake Humphrey. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello, friends. How are you both? Nice to see you. Yeah, very well. Very well. Indeed, this is about as close as we get to each other these days, isn't it?
I know, in the newfound world where we talk to each other via screens and whatnot, but it's nice to have a virtual catch-up.
It's lovely. Have you noticed that no one does phone calls anymore? Like every meeting now seems, I'll send a Zoom link. I'm like, we don't always have to do it. Why can't we just talk on the phone? That's like the dying art form now, a phone call.
Yeah. Do you have a landline at home? Because I don't have one now, and I just don't need one. I use my mobile for everything.
So we have a landline, and I reckon I've not picked up that phone in 2 years, and it rings every day, twice a day, and it's always the same person. And it's always Harriet's mum. So when the phone rings, instead of answering it, I go, Harriet! Mum's on the phone! It's like,
Jake, you're a very busy man at the moment. It's all turned out very well in terms of your career path. Did you know where you were heading when you first started off on this journey back in, what were you, 22, 23 when you started?
No way. Absolutely not. I mean, so I only really ended up in telly anyway through failing my A-levels, which was awkward because I remember I had a place at Nottingham University. Do you remember the UCAS book back in it's probably an online thing now, but it was a book in those days, a great big thick book. And this rumour went round where I was doing my A-levels that at Nottingham University, there was 3 women to every bloke. I don't know whether that was the same rumour when you were at university.
I heard that rumour as well.
Was it true? Was it true?
I don't know, because I never ended up going because I didn't get the grades I needed. Everyone's like, apply to Nottingham. Honestly, there's like 3 women to every bloke. And I was like the eternally single bloke at school. So I was like, oh, finally, there might actually be a chance to have a girlfriend. I'll apply for Nottingham. And I needed BCC to study media studies. I didn't know I wanted to work in telly, but I sort of, I'd done a bit of work experience at a PR company when I was doing my GCSEs. And so I thought I'd just do a bit of media stuff. I think maybe being a journalist was possibly a vague plan, but it was no more than that. And I remember turning up in my mum's beautiful pistachio green VW Polo.
Hi, girls.
Yeah. And like you go up to you remember you'd go and say your surname, wouldn't you? And they'd go to the alphabet and you like see I was sort of nervous just thinking about it. And you go, hi, Humphrey, H. Humphrey. They go through Jacob Humphrey.
Humphrey.
And I got the first one out and I had an E for my A-level English. And I was like, wow, that slightly scuppers the plans. But then in my head, when you just have that sort of feeling that everything's going to be fine when you're an 18-year-old or whatever, I just thought, well, if I get 2 A's, that's enough points to get that place at uni. So everything should be fine. And I opened my second one, which is politics, and I had an N.
What's that?
And I was like, well, exactly. So I went to the teacher and said, excuse me, I've got an N here. And she said to me, oh, an N is for someone that isn't clever enough to get an E, but not so thick they got a U.
What?
Yeah,
is that what she said?
True. That's true.
It was different in those days, wasn't it? You, like, as a teacher, you could just custard pie people, no problem.
I thought the N stood for nearly in that respect.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, nearly.
No.
Yeah, nearly a plus. Nearly an E. Yeah, N for nearly. So I guess like a point below an E. So I suppose if you really were desperate for the E, you could get them to remark the paper.
Yeah.
And then my final result was a U. So I got ENU, and I still went clubbing that night at Highs in Norwich and got a shout out to the E New Boy on the dance floor. And So I woke up in the morning at my mate Arthur's house, and weirdly, he'd got the same results as me, but he was going to be a Royal Marine. So he had his place in the Royal Marine Corps. So he was fine, no issue for him. It wasn't sort of grade dependent. And he's gone on to have a brilliant military career, actually. He's now a teacher out in the United States. But I woke up at his house, and his dad was a vicar in Norwich, lovely, really gently spoken guy. And he came upstairs and he said, Jacob, I just wanted to let you know that there's been a few messages on the answer machine from your parents. So I went downstairs, and basically there was like four messages on my friend Arthur's family's phone. You know, the old ones with the cassettes?
Miniature cassette, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, tiny little thing. So it was like... rewound it, played it again, and it's my dad getting extremely sort of like frustrated that I wasn't answering the phone. And the final message was, Jacob, come home now, we need to sort out your future.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a big message, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a strong message. But they had a friend visiting, and weirdly this woman, who was like a white witch, like she actually dabbled in that kind of stuff, but in a really positive way. So she was into psychic stuff and the future, and I arrived, and she actually said in front of my parents, she said, I think it's important you all know this is the best thing that's ever happened to him. And my mum and dad were just like, it's not your son. It's very easy for you to say this to make him feel better, but it's not your son. And actually, the very day I went back to school to redo, because I basically I had to write to the school. It's embarrassing because my mum was a teacher there.
Right.
So I had to write to the school, go back to the Hewitt to redo a whole year of A-levels. And on the first day back, all of the guys had gone off to do uni or go to the Marines or have a gap year, and I was back at school. And there was a letter, my politics teacher had a letter from a local TV company saying, would anyone who's studying politics like to come onto a TV show, sit on a sofa and talk about politics, like Question Time for kids, basically.
Yeah.
So I just thought, yeah, bloody hell, I'll do that, because life's basically a bit crap at the moment. So I went down there, and I managed to blag my way into doing work experience for them. So I worked Saturday and Sunday and got paid £5 cash for the weekend, answering phones, doing the auto cue, helping the sound guy, whatever. And that led to my career in telly. So it's impossible to say I had a grand plan. I definitely didn't have a grand plan. I was lucky, man.
It's funny though, isn't it? The way that things pan out. You know, I'm a big believer in fate, and I think you've just gone and proven it there, because you often have this situation where you think, right, well, imagine if you had got those grades and you had gone to Nottingham, let's say, and you had gone to media studies. That would have been another 3 years of your life where arguably when you came out, you might not have been any further up the career ladder than you were actually by taking the more vocational route, if you like, and then had 3 years of practical experience, you know, which I think in your instance certainly paid dividends.
Everything. I think there was something like at that time, 16,000 people a year leaving uni with some sort of a media degree. Yeah. Like you're just one of 16,000. And I liken it a bit to your world, actually, JP. Like coming out of my A-levels and getting that job in telly is like getting the perfect exit from a corner with a 70-year straight ahead of me. And basically, I got a good exit. You know, when they say, oh, you know, when I remember when I did my, what's it called when you get your your driver's license? My arts. When I did my arts, the guy's like, now just remember, when you come out this corner, you carry the speed all the way down the straight. Bad exit from the corner, bad run down the straight. Yeah. And I kind of now feel like I got a good exit from the corner of life. And it just helped me out. It doesn't mean that at any moment I might not spin into the wall. But it was absolutely the right way to come out of that corner.
Do you know what, Dave? Just what you were saying there. Do you remember that great film, Sliding Doors?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Just that one moment, that split one moment can change the complete rest of your life.
Yeah. All three of us sitting here now, we've all had a sliding doors moment. We've all had a little thing that's come all the way, that's hit us in our lives. And it means we're sitting here. And actually, like, even the fact we're here is basically a miracle. Like, think of those millions of sperm. We were the one that made it through. And that, I mean, we get a bit deep, but then you make it through childhood, and then you make it through your teenage years when all sorts of things can go wrong. And then some people race cars for a living and are still knocking around after all those risks and stuff they've taken. It's like, for the three of us to be sitting at this moment in time having this conversation is a result of minuscule things you don't. I mean, I had a friend, right? I mean, this is a good example of sliding doors. My best friend at school was a police officer, and he was running the London Marathon. And he went out for a run, forgot his headphones. He was only 20 yards from the front door, went back to get them. And then he went on his run again. And as he ran under a branch of a huge tree, it fell and killed him. Now, that is the ultimate example of the tiniest decisions in your life. Now, imagine if he'd have not gone back, or even if he'd have tripped while he was running, he might have either arrived and gone, bloody hell, that's a big branch on the floor.
Yeah.
Or even, oh my, wow, look at that branch behind me. I was a bit lucky today. It's those tiny little moments in life. None of us know it. You know, you wait at a junction, that literally can change what happens 20 yards down the road. We've all pulled up behind car crashes and thought, good job I wasn't going 2 miles an hour faster for the last hour, or I'm in that. You know, it's you can't overthink it, I think.
This conversation needs a very nice bottle of red and slightly dim lights.
Yeah.
Around a table. Maybe a bit of cheese as well.
I think you're right.
Jake, in terms of you, 3 pivotal moments, I think, in terms of the career, as I understand it. First, obviously, getting your break into CBBC, aged very young, as you were at the time. Then to make the transition into sport from kids, which is not an easy transition, nor a natural one necessarily. Not many people have done it successfully, to my knowledge. And then for me, the move to BT Sport, which, I'll be honest with you, I thought was a big risk.
Yes, I remember that moment thinking, phew.
You know, I remember at the time, as a colleague and as a friend, I was worried that you'd maybe not made the right decision, because to me, you had this perfect situation at the BBC in terms of your position within their presenting staff amongst all these different sports. And I thought, do you know what? Jake's got everything. He's in a fantastic position. Why would he potentially risk it by going to BT? And actually, you did it. And I thought, well, I dearly hope he's made the right decision. And I think that actually time has proven now that you have, and it's been a good move. But I was worried for you at the time.
Yeah.
Did it feel like a risk for you, Jake?
Yes, definitely. And it actually felt like even more of a risk when I'd done it and I turned up for the first day at BT Sport, because I remember walking into a room of 6 people sitting around a table. And I said, "Whoa, nice to see you all." And they went, "Well, yeah, literally, this is the whole of it.
This is everybody.
This is it." There was no studios. There was no other presenters. There was nothing else other than sort of one bunch of Premier League rights and some stuff we inherited from ESPN, who BT inherited. But it just was a whole host of factors that just made me feel like it was the right thing to do. I mean, one of the really big early lessons I was given in TV was when my first boss said to me, "My one bit of advice for you: never sit in the comfy chair." And that did ring in my ears. It rang in my ears when I tried to get out of kids TV to get into sport, because I went for a meeting with the lady who was in charge of the talent for BBC Sport at the time. We're going back now to about 2007.
Yeah.
And I sat and had a conversation with her, and she ended the conversation by saying, "BBC Sport don't employ people like you." In other words, I wasn't a journalist. I wasn't an ex-sports person. I was hosting a show on CBBC at the time called Mobster Lobster. I mean, it was like, it almost made me feel like I was stupid for even believing that I could move from dressing up as a lobster, running around the Blue Peter Garden, to hosting sports programs. But I knew, and I remember saying, I went to see a brilliant guy who I'm still in touch with now called Niall Sloan. And I said to him, "Look, Niall, I just really think that I can relate to the audience, and I think they like the way that I present. And I'm not an amazing sports buff. I've never played football. I've never raced a Formula 1 car. I've not done any of this stuff. But I just feel like I answer the questions people at home want to hear." And I was kind of, again, fate stepped in and luck played a role. And I think we should never discount how important luck is in all of our lives. Yeah. Where the boss at the B wanted them to make their sports coverage a little bit younger and a little bit more interesting. Just as I was saying, give us a job. Yeah. And I didn't think that would lead to me landing the role of the BBC's Formula 1 presenter. I had no idea that was going to come my way.
Was Formula 1 always a passion?
No, it wasn't. It was something that I liked. I mean, I thought that my uncle, who was a European superstock racer, was like Michael Schumacher growing up as a kid. He would race stock cars around Europe, basically wearing a blue boiler suit and a helmet from he lives in Wisbech.
Is this in the Brisker Championship?
Yeah, well, he would have gone on. He went off to Germany a lot and raced stock cars in Germany and stuff. So I don't know what that would have been.
I mean, they're proper things, actually. Got big engines and they're quick. Yeah.
But that was as exotic and as exciting as I thought life got. My Uncle Michael was like right up there. And I come from Norfolk, or I moved here when I was 7 from Peterborough. But this is we're 10 miles from Snetterton, we're 5 miles from Hethel, where Lotus are from. There's that real lovely undercurrent of motorsport in this county. So I had an interest, but I'd never been to a Grand Prix. I didn't grow up we had no money as a kid. So I didn't grow up in like a house where we were off to watch Formula 1 all the time and stuff, because it was, it was expensive. But as soon as they mentioned it, I started thinking about it, thinking, I can't even imagine how good that would be. And I remember actually, they asked me to do a side of A4 on how I would present Formula 1. And I took it in thinking we we're going to have some great conversation about it. And I gave it to Niall, who was then the head of Formula One. And he took it from me and he just put it on the top of a pile of papers about 6 inches thick. And I thought, oh, that's how many people are writing a piece of A4 for you. So at that point, I just thought, this thing's never going to come my way. This is like pie in the sky stuff. And then a few weeks later, they called me in for a meeting and said, we spoke about Formula One for a bit. And then they said, would you like to go and count how many steps it is from here to the lifts? This is at the old television centre. And I thought,
yeah,
I don't know what's going on. This feels mad.
What does that mean?
Just basically bugger off for 5 minutes, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I went off.
Is that a bit like going to find tartan paint or something like that? Or
Exactly.
a glass hammer? Or,
I walked around a bit. And I remember now having this feeling like these people having a discussion that's going to change the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I walked back in and they said Mr. Sloan and Mr. Wilkin would like to offer you the job of being the BBC's presenter of Formula One. And I said, Mr. Humphrey will be delighted to accept.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I must say, Jake, you revealing that you weren't a fan makes what the moment you stepped onto that, that stage, that global stage presenting, I thought you were. I thought, I generally thought, obviously I knew you from kids TV and all the rest of it, but I thought, he knows it. So I think you pulled a masterstroke, which just shows how good you are.
Mm. So Jake, listen, in terms of your career, it's all very nicely aligned with the podcast, I think, really. The High Performance Podcast has been a huge success. Yourself and Professor Damien Hughes, who's actually a real professor, unlike Professor Green. Where did the idea come from? How did you kick it off? How has it become the success that it has?
So, you spoke to me at the very beginning about quitting the Beeb to go to BT. Mm. I think in many ways, the podcast is the epitome of that kind of decision. And I think that, that first bit of advice, never sit in the comfy chair, married up with the fact that I was born in a little village in Norfolk. And I always had this feeling, right, that there's successful people in life that do amazing things. And then there's people like me. And I really was the epitome of the story that you write about yourself is the story that you end up living, right? And it was only really getting into TV and then working my way into Formula One that I finally got the chance to speak to team principals and CEOs and circuit promoters and billionaires and Formula One drivers and all these weird, very weird and interesting people that move around that Formula One circuit. And my question was basically, how did you end up doing this?
Yeah.
And I kind of thought there'd be some amazing thing that they know or they've done or something that's happened to them. And of course, there was a bit of nepotism and there was a few people born in Monaco that were always going to be in that world and whatever, or sons of rich people. But also a lot of them were self-made success stories who'd all failed and they'd all had self-doubt and they'd all had struggles and all of them were just relentless and they were consistent and they knew that the first thing you have to do is the action. So action leads to motivation rather than spending your life waiting for the motivation to do something. They'd just gone out there and done it. And then I just wanted to share the story.
And so do you think also with people like that, from failure, you get a sort of emotional scar tissue, which does that help to protect you in the rough and tumble of trying to climb up that ladder?
I certainly think it gives you an armor that you need. I mean, if I can look back at my life, bullied at school, moved schools, failed my A-levels, as you know, fired from McDonald's, as you know. My grandma sadly took her own life when I was a teenager because she was struggling. And that was a very difficult time because grandparents don't do that, right? They're just they're the sorted people in your life who are always happy with a smile on their face and they put a pound coin in your hand. And all those moments, as we've already said, what's hard isn't bad. So all those things were so hard. And of course, I'd wish some of them hadn't happened. In fact, probably the only one I wish hadn't happened was my grandma's death. The other three, the bullying, the sacking and the failing of my A-levels, perfect, lovely. I'll definitely have those again. And people go, would you like to go back and tell yourself something when you were 7? And I'm like, no, I want to learn all those things. I want to fail. I want to realize that failures are common, not a full stop. I want people to realize that if you helicopter around your kids all the time, solving every problem that might lay in front of them, either with money or with conversations, you're just creating children with no resilience who then fail the first job interview they get at 21. And that's fine, by the way, but it's not fun if you haven't got the emotional tools to deal with rejection and failure because you haven't been allowed to fail. It builds resilience. And all three of us, right, know how important resilience has been in our careers, right?
I think it's crucial. I think the ability and the dogged determination to get back up when you've hit the wall, you broke your nose, and then hit it again and again and again. And you know what? I'm a firm believer. If you want something bad enough, if you've got the passion and the hard bit is finding out what that is, That's the tricky bit. But once you found your passion, guess what? There's a good chance you'll get there. You just got to work hard.
And that, in essence, is the message that's coming out from the podcast, isn't it? From all these fantastic people that you've had on there, but all saying that actually there's a huge amount of graft and a huge amount of hard work and nothing comes easy, but it's all upstairs, isn't it? It's far more a mental process than it is a physical process.
Look, we said to Kelly Holmes, Dame Kelly Holmes, I'll ask you the same question in a second, JP. What percent of your career do you owe to your mental approach rather than your physical abilities? She said it was 80% in her head. What would you say?
I'd say more. I was going to say 90.
So 90%, so 10% of what you do on the track is your natural God-given ability to drive a car. The other 90% is dealing with the politics, having the spare capacity in those moments in the race. All the other tools that you need are in your head. And we just want people on the podcast to realize that life is very similar. Life is 95% how you react to the things that happen. And it's actually only 5% the things that happen. And, let's say we have a row right now, right? The thing we have is the row. If all three of us are still thinking about it in 3 days' time, that's no longer the row. That's our own interpretation of what happened. When Harriet, who has a bit of anxiety, starts saying, like we're due to go skiing. Well, who knows if we're going to go skiing with all this COVID stuff, right? She's like, I'm really worried about whether we go skiing. I'm really worried. What if we go there and I'm like, how about you write a different story and choose to believe the positive story? Because pessimists attract pessimists, and they tell each other nothing good is ever going to happen, and then nothing good ever happens because they exist in that world. Optimists attract optimists, and they believe good things are going to happen. Therefore, they don't take no for an answer, and they think that the next person will say yes. And you keep on asking, and eventually they'll say yes. I liken it to buying lottery tickets, and I would say to anyone listening to this, keep buying bloody lottery tickets. Keep on going, because all it takes is one of those lottery tickets to come in. And I'm not talking about lottery tickets, but just keep on trying things, speaking to new people, investing in relationships, exploring what your potential is, questioning whether where you are is really where you want to be, trying to find your passion, trying to find really what your purpose is in life. Keep on buying all these different lottery tickets for all these different areas of your life. The odd one will come in, and when it comes in, it feels amazing. And I think the two of you are a really good example for the fact that success in life is not a linear path, right? And we could talk for hours about our failures and our struggles and the times that we reflect on that were hard. But the point is, you both are living your passion, and I think if we can get to the point where we all live a purpose-driven life, then I think that we can't go far.
So from the podcast came the book. Talk about that.
So I want people to realize that the podcast is not a sports podcast, right? We talk to all kinds of different people. Yes, sports people, but entrepreneurs and artists and investors and actors and all kinds. And one of the people we spoke to was a lady called Jo Malone, who created
the perfumes and the candles and whatnot.
Pomegranate noir. Like there's candles all around my gaff.
There you go. He knows. And a few years ago, she had a breast cancer diagnosis, right? Yes. And she said that when she had a diagnosis, she had this new way of living. She's like, right, I'm going to live in a different way. But then over time, she said the lessons, her phrase was, slip through my fingers like sand, which I think is a really good analogy for all these. We all go, oh yeah, I'm going to live differently. And then we never do because life takes over, right? So, the podcast has gone well. And lots of messages from people going, this episode changed my life. This lesson altered the way I think. This lesson's led me to do that. And it's all great stuff. But then also lots of people saying, how do I remember what I heard John Wilkinson talk about a year ago? How do I remember what the explorer Nims Purger told me? How do I keep hold of the feeling that the actor Matthew McConaughey gave me when I listened to him on your podcast? So we wanted to create something that brought together all the listeners from the podcast, but also, as you say, I'm just some, slightly lucky former kids presenter. Damien is an actual professor. So all of his knowledge and experience and all the research-backed stuff that he brings to the table. And then we wanted to bring in kind of a bit of personal responsibility, really, which is to say to people, you can read this book, but then at the end of each chapter, and we use pit stops actually, JP, because we liken the fact that often in a big motor race, it's the pit stop that wins the race. It's important to have that moment to reflect and actually stop just for a second. So the pit stops were brought in for that reason, and they are little sort of instructions really for how you can then interpret the stuff you've learned in that chapter and put it into your own life, little exercises that you can do to bring it into your own life. So it's a kind of coming together of everything that's happened on the podcast, all the conversations we've had. And it puts a bit of responsibility on the reader as well. So if people are looking for something for Christmas or for New Year that they really want to give them that New Year lift, high performance lessons from the best on becoming your best is what it's called. And I think it's a good read, but then I'm totally biased. So maybe buy it and make up your own mind.
It's already on my list for Father Christmas.
Love it. Love it.
Jake, let's talk cars. I'm going to take you back to your mum's Polo. Was it pistachio green that you mentioned earlier on? And you also referenced your uncle and stock cars. Talk us back to the early days of the automotive memories and the special times for a young Jake Humphrey.
Wow. Okay. So our very first car would have been a sort of fiery red Toyota Corolla.
Ooh, nice.
With a huge bright yellow sticker on the back saying, "Mind that child, he may be deaf," which was on the back of a lot of cars in the 1980s for some reason. Do you remember those stickers?
Yeah, I did.
And we never had much money. My mum was a teacher. My dad was a charity worker. So the cars were never like something flash in our lives. Cars were just a function. We were a one-car family for a long time. So it was Toyota Corolla Estate to a Renault Savannah, which I actually loved. A Renault Savannah.
I had a Savannah.
Did you?
Yeah,
Felt seats inside, grey felt seats, and we were like, "Wow!"
I think they might call that velour.
Yeah, it was like a velour. You're right, velour seats. We were like, "Dad, this is so posh." And the only person in our life that had a sexy car was my grandma. She had she was the coolest, man. She had a white XR3i.
Oh wow!
And I remember she had this really cool CD, which was classical music, but with a slightly like modern beat under it. And this is obviously highly illegal, but when I was about 8 years old, she lived in Wisbech, and we used to go to a swimming pool called the Hudson. And after we'd been to the Hudson, we go for fish and chips. And after fish and chips, she'd drive us back to our house in the country. And for the last quarter of a mile, she'd put the classical CD on max. It might have even been a tape, actually. And she'd open the sunroof, and me and my cousin Simon would stand out of the sunroof.
Brilliant.
For the last mile with the music blaring from this classical music. It was brilliant.
She sounds cool as a cucumber.
Brilliant. She was so cool. She was so cool. But actually, that was the part of my life. It was my cousins where cars were exciting because they were farmers. So they built him like a truck. Because they used to burn back in those days. After you'd done the harvest, you'd set fire to the field,
Yes, stubble burning.
And so it was his job. When we were like 11, it was his job to drive like a 4x4 with a hose pipe and a big water butt on the back. And we'd drive around the edge of the field and we'd spray any areas of the ditch around the edge of the field where the straw had blown into the field and was going to make a fire. Imagine how cool that is at that age.
Yeah.
And the responsibility on you as kids as well, with stuff like that, which
what fun. I was sitting on combine harvesters messing about. It was just brilliant. And actually, I think it's my brother who's developed the car gene. My brother, he has like 7 or 8 different cars. All of them are kind of in a slight state of disrepair, but he's always working on a little classic car. He spends his weekends at a car garage. And in fact, the closest Harriet and I have ever come to getting divorced was when about 2 days before Sebastian, our second child, was due. My brother had asked me months before, "Can you come with me to collect a barn find from Italy?" And it was a Fiat Dino.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which was his father-in-law's, but his father-in-law had put it in a shed in the 1980s and forgotten about it. Interesting. And then said, "Oh, I've got a Fiat Dino in a shed." And so my brother said, "Do you want to come and help me collect it?" And then he turned up at our house about 4:00 in the morning, and Harriet just went, "You're not seriously going to go, are you?" I was like, "Well, it's all been arranged." She's like, "We're having a baby in 2 days." And I was like, "But I need to go." She's like, "Well, if you walk out this door, that is it. You can't leave me to his foreign duty." So I said, "Look, I've got to go. I can't let my brother down."
Mate, you're a brave lad.
Yeah.
Got in the truck with him. I said, "Tom, we've got to get there as quick as we can." So we drove to Asti in just near Juventus, right in the hills of the north of Italy.
Yeah.
We went on the ferry, crossed the ferry, all the way through France, into Italy, over the top of the mountain. And we got there in a day. And then we got there about 11 o'clock at night, got to the hotel, slept, woke up about 7, went to this local guy who we'd paid €100 to drag this rotten old car out of a shed, put it on the back of, oh, by the way, we had a trailer with us.
I was going to say that was a crucial bit of information. You must have had a trailer with you.
You wouldn't forget that when we got there. Head all the way back through France. And then we got on the ferry. This is mad, really. Got on the ferry, got across. As we were pulling off the ferry, one of the guys working on the ferry said, "It's making a really weird noise somewhere." And we were like, "Well, we've just driven through the whole of France, so I think it'll be fine." So we pull off the ferry, so down south somewhere, pull off the ferry, start driving up the road, and it goes bang. And we're like, whoa, put the brakes on. And the two wheels from the trailer rolled past us.
No.
God.
We were like, what's happened there? Got out, went out. The trailer was then flat on the floor. And I'd left the handbrake on the trailer.
Oh, no.
When we'd stopped at the services in France about 4 hours previously. Everything. And I don't know what it had done, but it sheared off the wheels. And that could have happened on some motorway in France an hour before. Luckily, we were going 25 miles an hour through a little town in England. So then at 11 o'clock at night, we had to find a local garage, gave this guy 150 quid to move the Dino onto his truck.
Trying to deliver it.
He took it back to his car place. Like he had like a used car place. We then stuck some fresh wheels on the trailer, got the trailer home. My brother had to pay this guy to drive the Fiat Dino up to Norwich. And it's still not been touched to this day. 6 years later. I said, yes. I said to my brother, how's that Fiat Dino? He's like, yeah, I've not had a chance yet to do anything with it.
And the thing is, you'll always remember how long he's had it because it's, 2 days older than your son, Sebastian?
Yeah. And Seb arrived perfectly happily about 4 days later. So the whole thing I knew it'd be perfect, obviously.
And the heat died down pretty quickly, I guess.
Yeah. Look, man, it was one night away to get to Italy and back. It's not bad with a car on the back of a train.
I think you did very well, Jake. Talk us through the Mr. Humphrey car history then. What's the first car? Where did you kick off?
So, we talk a lot on my podcast about process, not arrival, because all of these really popular, successful, rich folks always say, when I got to that place, it wasn't as amazing as I thought it would be. And one of my big mottos for everyone that listens to us is try and find happiness now. Don't think to yourself, I'll be happy when. When there's no bumps in the road, when I reach this moment, when that happens, because invariably it's not as exciting as you think. And there will always be issues. There'll always be the next thing you want. There'll always be bumps in the road. So you've got to find happiness now. Mm-hmm. And this is borne out to me because I've never had a greater sense of pride than when I bought my very first car, which was a British Racing Green MGF. And I bought it from an old guy. He was a retired guy, about 75. He lived in Colchester. Mm-hmm. I paid him 11,250 quid for it. It was a P-Reg, and I bloody loved it. And I'll never forget, because I had to get a banker's draft, right, which is like a check, but it guarantees your money, doesn't it? So he wanted that, so I gave him that, and he took me around to his garage, and he was like an old guy with a perfectly clean, beautiful garage, and he turned on the light, and it was like one of those strip lights, and it went flick, 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 flick. And as it was flicking before it actually turned on, I could see it flicking on this green. I was like, oh, I don't believe it. It's so beautiful. And wow. I loved it. I loved it so much. I ended up sadly sticking it into a field going too fast, which ripped off the whole left side. So that was the end of that. But then I brought an Audi TT from a fellow CBBC presenter, which I absolutely loved. It was the one with baseball leather. So it was like brown leather, but it had like baseball stitching on the leather.
Okay, yeah. This is obviously a Mark 1, the classic, the original one.
Yeah, it would have been, I think. Yeah. It would have been. It was X-Reg.
2000.
Yeah.
And you never thought about going into like opening a hair salon at all?
And there's a recurring theme here, isn't there? MGF, Audi TT. I love that car so much. And actually, I remember lying in my flat, dreaming of when I'd be sitting in it and how it would feel and how it would smell and how it would look, and it lived up to expectations. And I actually think I don't know if I've ever had a car that I love as much.
Well, do you know what? When that came out, that was iconic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was
I wish
like
I kept
a huge
it now.
step forward for design and shape.
It'll be a future classic, won't it?
Yeah, I think so.
There was a mate of mine, actually, who had one up until about 2 years ago in really, really good nick, one of those Mark 1s. And he said he was going to sell it. And I said, don't sell it, honestly. If you can possibly afford to keep it, do. Because as you say, that will only go up in value. Anyway, he didn't listen and he sold it and he got himself an estate car. But I think he should have kept it.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I wish I'd kept mine, actually. It was silver. I loved it. And then I always wanted a BMW. I wanted an M3 convertible, but I could only afford a 330i. But I loved that. That was silver with the roof off. And then I became an ambassador for a while for BMW, which basically involved going to Goodwood, which was nice and easy. And in return, I had a Z4. Again, the same theme as like little soft top run around.
I had one of those.
Lovely little thing.
Good bit of kit. Really nice car.
Looked like a little shark. It was cool.
Yeah.
And then we had kids. So then we've now gone more towards estate cars. But my kind of fun mobile is is a Lotus. I've got an Evora, and I'm waiting for the Emira in 2022 because I just feel like, you know, they're local. And
this is am I right in thinking, is this the last Lotus that will have a combustion engine? Did I read that the other day?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're going fully electric, and they're smart, man, because they've got kind of one chassis, which is the new sort of EV chassis, which all the cars will be based on. And I think there's going to be SUVs, and there's going to be, they've obviously got the hypercar, the Avaya hypercar that they've created, but I haven't got the spare 2.5 million knocking around to buy that.
That thing sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Oh, mate. I've actually seen Jensen Button up there quite a lot at Hethel, because he's got an Avaya, and he's doing something with Radford and Lotus and stuff. So he seems to be there all the time. But I guess when you've bought an Avaya from them, they'll probably roll out the red carpet and give you a free sausage roll whenever you like. Cracking looking car. But I think the Emira is going to be stunning. I can't wait to get my hands on that. I mean, I actually think it's even prettier than the Avaya. And it's not, I say it's not expensive. It's like, they're trying to go up against Porsche. So it's like 60 grand car, and it looks.
And when do you say that's coming next year? 22 or 23?
Yeah, well, the orders, like, they went to Goodwood, right? And they took like 12 or 18 months worth of orders for the car at Goodwood.
Did they really? Wow.
Absolutely incredible. So
there was a documentary on this the other night. I was watching it.
About the car?
Yeah, absolutely. And just how everybody was so excited. But no, the thing that stuck in my mind was not only is it an exceptionally pretty car, as Lotuses always are, but it was the fact that with it being the last combustion engine makes it a really, really special piece of history.
And I love the heritage of the whole place. I mean, when I first started working at Rapture TV, right back to that letter that came in when I was doing my A-levels, they got us working on a computer games show. And we actually wrote to Lotus and said, we'd really like to have a Lotus that we arrive at the beginning of the show in this Lotus. So the head of PR, a woman called Pranelia, did us a deal for £1. I had a Lotus for 6 months, and I had to insure it myself. It was more in insurance than I was earning at the time. So my dad had to lend me a couple £100. I got 6 points on my license, and by the end of the 6 months of ragging this Lotus around the Norfolk countryside, I was like, I was only 18 or whatever. I thought that's enough of that. I sort of got away with one there a little bit, but that was a beautiful Kermit Green Mark I Lotus Elise.
Yeah.
But then for years they've been told investments coming, there's a big change around the corner, then the future's rosy, and it's never happened. Whereas now you go down there and you honestly feel like this really is the beginning again for Lotus. And the fabric around here where I live is indelibly stained by the history of that car brand. So there's a place called Ketteringham Hall, just down the road.
The F1 team used to be,
which is where the F1 team were based. There's a cafe, and next door to the cafe is the office that Colin Chapman used to design his cars in, and it's just there. Right? And it's like that was Chapman's office. And then I go through the little village next to us called Intwood, and he lived in the hall there, and his wife is still living there. I mean, his house is 2 minutes from mine, and every time I drive past, I just think like, man, like Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna was driven through those gates. There's a place called Rugger Drive, RUGGE Drive, right, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
And it is 2 minutes from my house. It's round the corner, and it is the most nondescript 1960s housing estate of bungalows you've ever seen in your life. You know, nothing happens up on Rugger Drive. Ayrton Senna lived there when he first came to the UK.
He lived there?
Yeah.
How cool is that?
And that's where he lived when he arrived as Ayrton Senna de Silva. And you know what? On his birthday, I go up there and leave some flowers out on the. People must think, who's this weird guy just leaving flowers on a front garden on some random street? But I've done it since I realised that number 34 Rugger Drive was the home of Ayrton Senna, and it's like a nice little touch, really.
Well, that needs a blue plaque.
I think it needs a blue plaque. You know, you got to celebrate that sort of heritage when you have it on your.
Well, do you know what? I did a little bit of work for Lotus way back in the days as a young driver, worked in, on manufacturers' days, and we met. And I'm racking my brains to try and remember his name, but anyway, he was their chief test driver, who I can't remember, on the road car division, and they just had this way about them where they made brilliantly handling cars, and they went to the nth degree, and that ethos was Colin. So it'd be great to see them back. Be great to see them re-energized, and some good money in there.
When you see these cars, what is lovely is I know that there's a Chinese firm, Geely, now owns them.
Yeah.
But the DNA of Lotus exists still. You know that brilliant phrase? What was it that Colin Chapman said? If you put a fast engine in, it'll be fast down the straights. If you make it lighter, it'll be faster everywhere. It is still absolutely that. I mean, I know it's quite a few years old now, but the Evora, when I take the Evora out, before I had this Evora, I did actually have the car I'd always dreamed of, which was a black Aston Martin Vanquish Volante carbon black edition. So it was like black alloy wheels, black car, black leather. And I was that cheesy loser that used to play like the Skyfall theme, you know, the James Bond theme, only to myself when I was driving it. Well, I just was desperate to own an Aston Martin at some point in my life and think that I'm James Bond. And I've done that. And the sound of that car, man, I used to love that car when it was hardly moving, like to pull up into the car park for the school run.
You always look back at it after you've parked it.
And
just have a little glance backward.
I had a deal with Seb, who's my youngest. So we could take them to the gate. This is like post-COVID. You could take them to the gate, but you couldn't go into the classroom anymore. So I'd take them to the gate, and every day he'd look at me and go, "Daddy, can you turn on the car before I go in?" So every single day he'd stand at the fence at their school, and I'd go in and just go, and he just like this smile would come across Seb's face, and I'd be like, "Brilliant. Good lad." And even now, like this morning, we woke up, we were watching the Bathurst 1000 together on the telly, and he was like, it's amazing. He's only 6 years old, but he was watching them, and he started saying little things to me like, "Oh, Daddy, they've got good strategy, haven't they?" And
is that right?
Yeah,
really?
Not because they do, but just because he hears the conversations about. And he was like, he said, "They do pit stops in this, Dad." And it was actually him that noticed they were changing the brakes on the car.
Brilliant.
So one of the guys came out and said, it's a long old race, and they were changing the brakes, and he's like, "Are they changing the brakes, Dad?" I was like, "Wow, mate, you're 6 years old." And he hairs around here in the garden. He's got a motorbike. He's got a quad bike. He's got a little ride on. So he could be the petrol head of the family, I think.
You see, the next generation of petrol heads being bred in
No, Dave. The next generation of electric heads. He's got an electric motorbike.
Yes.
And an electric quad bike. He will not know. He will not know of a combustion engine, will he?
It's very true. No. Very true.
And we've had lots of discussions with other guests about this, haven't we? That, the new generation, they're just not interested in engines. Give it another generation, it's all gone.
Mate, honestly, I reckon our grandchildren anyway will say to us, they'll say, hold on. Let me just get this straight. So you used to drill into the ground, which was really bad. And then you'd take out stuff, and then you'd put it in the back of a lorry, drive the lorry to all these places around town, put the stuff in the ground, suck it out of the ground and put it in your car, and then drive your car. And the stuff coming out of the lorry and the stuff coming out of the car and the stuff coming out of the ground was all really bad for the environment, and you breathed it in and stuff. I think that's the conversation to have, and we'll be like, because
that's what we did.
That's just kind of what was acceptable at that time. It's mad, really. It's mad, but it doesn't. When you put it in those terms.
Before we worry about all the damage that we're doing to the environment, I have one final question for you, Jake, before we let you go and do the school run, probably in an electric, green vehicle. We always think that music and cars go well together, so we need your fantasy drive, please. Where are you? Where are you going? What are you listening to? And most importantly, what are you driving?
It's a great shout. So do I have to drive a car that I've got, or can I drive any car that I like?
Anything in the world. So you've got a blank sheet of paper in terms of what it is, what's on the soundtrack, what the destination is, just your dream drive.
And it's someone else's checkbook.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, so if it's someone else's checkbook, then it is an AC Cobra.
Okay. Nice.
And I am there's nowhere that thrills me greater than driving around the country lanes of North Norfolk at sunset, which is the key time. With the sun setting, it will look stunning. It will look amazing. And the roads there are brilliant. Yeah. And what am I listening to? I'd have to hark back to my glory days on F1. I'd have to have the chain on. I'd have to be hearing the famous strum coming through. It still sort of fills me with dread and excitement in equal measure, but that would be me. Yeah, a beautiful sort of like cobalt blue Cobra with the white stripes down the bonnet. And
I want to be parked in a lay-by.
Yeah.
I'll maybe just go outside for one of those, I'm desperate for a wee, and then you blast past and because you'd be mouth open. Look at that.
You don't want to come in the passenger seat now. He doesn't trust me enough, you see.
That's a negative, Ghost Rider.
And on that note, Jason, I think you need to take us out.
Oh, mate, literally, we could speak here all day, couldn't we? But unfortunately, we have to say that is it for this current series of Fueling Around, powered by Adrian Flux. As the UK's largest specialist insurance broker, Adrian Flux will tailor a quote to your exact needs and help save you money on your car, your bike, or even your home insurance. Dave, as always, thanks to you, but a huge thanks to our very special guest this week, the one and only Mr. Jake Humphrey. Humphrey.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really enjoyed that. It's so nice to see you both.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas, Jake, to you and the family. Don't forget, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at Jason Plato or at David Vitty. And if you like what you've heard, feel free to give us a 5-star rating, press the subscribe button, and share the podcast on all your socials.
Thanks again for listening. Have a brilliant Christmas and a super New Year. And we'll see you next time. Ta-da!